my issue with it now seems to be that the minister doesn't believe that this should be a policy or a vision for the future that is the world-class education system we want our children to benefit from, that we should seek to reintroduce French or European languages as standard at a younger age, and that doesn't seem to be even on their radar, and I find that particularly disappointing, and I think that that is disadvantaging our young people from being able to have the competency in language at later, both at the school career and in their wider career going forward into the world.
A point of clarification maybe, so that 2012 change, it means there's no longer obligatory teaching, is that right, in primary schools of French?
Of French or Spanish or anything.
Any language. I think even Manx is optional.
Well, Manx is across all the schools. Manx is provided to all private schools.
But I don't think it's made.
You have to opt into it, don't you?
Yeah.
Because the curriculum is with the teachers. My issue with particularly the modern foreign language, it's up to the teachers, but there's no central funding for that. And previously, it was provided with specialist teachers who had that capability. And you can't say, I mean, it's a bit like music provision. I'm concerned that there isn't a great deal of music provision widespread across all the schools, because it depends on having the capability, the specialisms, and the enthusiasm of the teachers within those schools to be able to deliver that.
I was lucky enough to be taught French at primary school, and I opted into some Manx as well. A lot of children now then won't necessarily have that opportunity as things stand. Was that right?
Yeah, that's right. And obviously I love French and I'm keen for people to learn French, but really any language learned by children at an early age is of massive benefit. And I think the problem with how the minister sees things, his comment about French not being a modern language, well, it's ridiculous, isn't it? It seemed pretty current last time I was in France. But I think he is thinking of languages from the point of view of a career. He's thinking that certain people will need to speak languages in order to be able to use them in their career. And so I think that's why he mentioned Mandarin, because Mandarin is an up-and-coming language, because there's obviously so many speakers in the world. But actually learning any language is massively beneficial. It improves the mental development, cognitive thinking. It makes you better at problem solving, at spatial awareness. It makes you a better listener. It makes you better at reading and picking up whether things seem accurate. So it makes you better. Your critical skills are improved. It can stave off dementia. There are so many benefits, and I really think that Graham Cregeen's emphasis, and it would have been great to have discussed this with him if he could have come. His emphasis on what's going to get you a job, and I actually think that any language. So I think that whether people want to learn French, Manx, Portuguese, whatever they want to learn, is going to be beneficial. But I think Daphne's absolutely right that the government needs to commit to putting themselves before it, to acknowledging that it makes better, learning a language makes better people. It's not just good for career options.
Maybe come one for you, Emma, if you wouldn't mind. Why maybe has that view come about that that French is kind of old-fashioned in inverted commas, do you think?
I'm not sure. I think there's a lot of different reasons why the decline in any sort of European modern languages happened, because especially with the amount of people that speak English that are foreign over here, I think we're kind of put off, and I think we don't see the point in learning a foreign language if everyone else can speak English. And that's actually really unreasonable to think about it like that, because on a global level, if we want to go and work somewhere else and there's someone else applying for the same job, the same amount of experience, but they speak English and their own mother tongue, they're already steps ahead of us. So I think there's part of that, and I think anyone you speak to of a certain age is like, I hated French at school, I had such a grumpy old teacher. And there's that French at school thing, the strict mistress that's making you recite verb tables. And I think there's better ways of learning now. We're a little bit more advanced in terms of how we understand people learn, and that people don't learn in the same way. They don't learn by repeating things, maybe they do it kinesthetically, anything else like that. So I think, maybe, I keep saying I think, that there's a stigma attached to it, and that's what's happened, and there's the influence of other foreign people speaking English, which has discouraged us from it.
But it's not helped as well by the fact that languages aren't compulsory at high school either. Well, they're compulsory in the first 3 years, but then when children get to choose their GCSE options, they have to do English, fine. They have to do maths, fine. They have to do science, fine. They have to do RE, a bit strange. But they don't have to do a language. And again, I think it's because the Department of Education thinks that languages aren't going to get you jobs, and they're not seeing all the myriad benefits that speaking a second language has.
We'll hear later on from somebody from King William's College who speaks a bit more about that, whether languages should be sort of obligatory at what would it be, qualification
GCSE,
level, GCSE or above. We've had a message in which ties in a bit nicely here. David H says, "Hi, with English being the most widespread language, including on the internet, why bother learning another language?" And that's a view that I think a lot of people have. It's easy to be complacent, isn't it, Mrs. Caine?
I don't think you need to be complacent. I think, as Stephanie's perfectly articulated, there are so many much wider benefits of speaking a language. And I don't agree that French is old hat and shouldn't be studied. It's proven that it's, the European languages, French and Spanish, are closest to English and the easiest to learn. So the success a child feels by being able to communicate in those languages, even to go on holiday to sort of nearer destinations, is a massive importance. And I did use French when I was representing the Isle of Man at a tourism fair in Paris some years ago, but I also take issue with the way it was learnt. Perhaps I was very fortunate. I had a Spanish native, Señorita Bath, who taught me Spanish, and I got an O-level, and I had Madame Velarde, who was married to a French native, who was my A-level French teacher, and she made French an amazing experience. We were immersed in it. We had a French class, double last period on a Friday. We had to go in, and it didn't matter what we spoke about or what we did, as long as we did it in French. We had French news, we had Pernod tasting, we had champagne tasting, we had wine tasting and croissants. We just had a gossip. And all of us went on to have pen friends, went on to, we instead of, it was a lot of coursework then, it was a very innovative kind of qualification. It wasn't just verb tables and vocabulary. We were encouraged to write. I wrote to Grasse-en-Provence, to perfume manufacturers, linked in with Madame Bovary, which we were studying. I got loads of perfume samples. I got leaflets on how perfume was made. I was completely inspired, and it was a brilliant way. I mean, I didn't actually do an awful lot of revision, but I still speak French to this day. You pick it up very quickly when you go away. And it was a benefit to the Isle of Man that I was educated in Sheffield and I had that advantage.
I'd probably, to bring you in, Eleanor, if you wouldn't mind, I think I'm right in saying, all learnt second or more languages in probably later life. Slightly different in your case. Do you find you still use other languages here when you're kind of in the UK much?
Yes, I'd definitely say so. I'm at Durham University right now and I study history, so nothing to do with languages really. But even within our course, medieval history at some point, we're talking about French monasteries, French comes up. I understand what it says on the screen, and people ask me, oh, can you please translate this for me? And, next year I'm picking up a Spanish module just because I can and because I know it's quite similar to the French grammar, which I know. I've known it since I was 8, and so I know that I can just build on that. And even being in the UK, you always meet people who are European, and it's that instant connecting factor, and also just to follow on from what Daphne said before, and what the comment said, why wouldn't you want to learn a different language? I don't understand why you wouldn't want to. People could say, oh, English is the most widespread language. That's good for me, that's enough. But why wouldn't you want to broaden your horizons? Why wouldn't you want to learn about a new culture, a new language? And perhaps learning about that could bring in a new perspective of your own culture. I honestly don't see any negatives surrounding it at all.
Yeah, it's a bit like saying, why wouldn't you want to do a crossword or, I don't know, do a Sudoku or do an evening class? Yeah, why not?
Why not?
And also what you said about picking up another language on top of the languages you've already got, I think that's an interesting point, because when you have learned a second language, then it's so much easier to learn any other language. 100%. And that actually includes computer coding languages as well. So a little bit of interaction with French up to GCSE level, say, then if at any point or at the same time you want to do computer coding, because your brain is used to picking up patterns and solving problems, so even a computer language is so much easier.
Yeah, and because of the languages I have, I can vaguely understand Dutch, I can vaguely understand Spanish, Portuguese, I have these basic kind of, words never differ that much and grammar never differs that much within European languages. And, I feel confident. I've never felt, going on holiday or whatever, that I've been isolated. I've not been able to understand anything, because you can always pick up some things. I was in Italy last summer, don't speak Italian, but I was able to communicate just through kind of, using the knowledge I have. And then I picked it up by the end of a week. I was, having little conversations. It
certainly makes holidays more fun, doesn't it? Because if you go to a tourist information place anywhere in France, say, and you speak enough French to be able to understand a poster that's not translated into English, you go to that event, you're with the locals, you're having conversations, meeting people, having proper French authentic experiences in a way that a tourist who doesn't have the language wouldn't be able to.
I just can't imagine it really, just only being able to speak one language. And I know for some people that, is a choice and maybe they only want to speak one language, but I honestly can't imagine it. I really don't think I'd be where I am today if I didn't have the languages that I do and the skills that I've gained from that.
Is it harder then to learn languages maybe on the island or in the UK because we don't have that immersion, or it's harder to find that immersion maybe that we would do if we were living elsewhere perhaps?
I think that's the great thing about Manx, is that you can learn Manx on the Isle of Man and go and hang out with other Manx speakers in the pub or on the beach, in a way that it's harder to hang out with other French speakers.
And there's also that connection between Gaelic with the Gaelic nations around from Cornwall to Scotland and Ireland, that there's a really good network and possibilities for cultural exchanges and tourism. But there are more immersions. I mean, Ramsey Grammar School just recently had Spanish student exchange, and I feel privileged that I started French at age 8, and that was standard across state schools in Sheffield, and then started a second language at secondary. But I feel that was a very privileged time, and I think what I really want to see is, I think the Isle of Man could get back to that, including all the additional enhancements of private tutor and private tuition. But I don't feel that the department is even keen about embracing the private sector to fill in the gap where it isn't prepared to go or doesn't have the budget to offer at the minute the language from Key Stage 2. And I find that incredibly disappointing, let alone not setting a target of in the future we wanted to roll, or we might think we would want to roll out foreign language, French or Spanish, at Key Stage 2. Why wouldn't we want to get back to that?
Well, we have obviously some private tutors with us. What's the kind of arrangement with Department of Education as things stand in both instances?
I conduct my lessons in schools, and so I have to pay the Department of Education to rent the space in the school. My lessons take place at lunchtime, so I don't need a caretaker to let me in. And excuse me, the lighting in the room is already on. The room's already heated. I don't cost anything when I go into the school. I use my own equipment, and yet I have to pay the Department of Education for that, and then the parents pay me, and I pay my tutors.
Probably a slightly different question, obviously, with you being so new. Really. But is that maybe something possibly for the future? I don't know. I don't want to
possibly. I think
anything.
I'd like to take away from the school aspect of it, because I think there's also a stigma there. Well, if I didn't learn it at school, it's a bit too late to do it now, and it's definitely never too late. And you don't have to go in and learn it rigidly. I've started this. There's a bit of a project I've got going on at the moment in terms of trying to put things out there that people can go and immerse themselves in. So I've got a film screening of Pan's Labyrinth coming up, which is in Spanish with English subtitles. You don't have to speak Spanish to go there, but you can go and immerse yourself in the culture. It's a cult film, and there's things like that can be pushed. And there's a platform on Duolingo called Duolingo Events, and at the moment there's none over here for Spanish or French events or anything else like that. If you are at least conversational in the language, you can apply to be an ambassador with Duolingo. It's free. They'll just give you a bit of help with planning events and give you a bit of merchandise, and you can put events on, and I don't see why anyone has stopped from doing that. I think there's definitely a market for putting on more cultural events like that maybe people don't have to go and fully learn a language. They don't have to learn all the grammar rules, but they can go and immerse themselves. They can understand a few more words, and when they go on holiday, they're more familiar with it. So I think that sort of thing, there's a lot of call for that at the moment.